Who is Arthur Rimbaud? He's a French poet from the 1800s. Just read Illuminations as well as A Season in Hell, which are his two, published works, although one of them was after, he knew it was being published. Anyways, now why, might you ask? I don't know, I was just really bored. I'm collecting my knowledge of poets as a not really that well-read guy, like Infinity Stones. I can't really write poetry and not read poetry, and I like writing poetry, so I gotta read poetry. I feel like those go hand in hand. Now, let me preface this review with two things. One, I have a pea-sized brain, and I only know English, as in Rimbaud is a French guy. It's written in French. So I'm just acknowledging here that by reading translations, I have got to be losing a lot of what was originally said, which is crazy because if there is some sort of quality loss there, I feel like what I still read was overwhelmingly beautiful, even if it's not in the original, mother tongue. I understand that when someone writes in a native language, when it's translated, you may be losing intentional pauses, phrases, word choice, flow, whatever. And Rimbaud is full of complex vocabulary and sentences, and a lot of them. It's entirely prose, which just means it's a paragraph, not stanzas often. And because of that, I think the translations are probably more varied, just because the vocabulary is so varied. As in, I read a translation from the library book, someone named Donald Revel. Is this the best translation? I don't know. Is it the most famous one? I don't know. I have no idea. It was kind of like reading with a handicap in terms of looking up the poem afterwards, because I'll read a poem by him. I'm like, oh my god. I was like, this one sucks. And I read the next one. Oh, that's pretty good. And I look it up. And then the one that I see online, it's not from the same translation, blah, 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 blah. It's a library book. I couldn't just keep the book. So the translations are slightly different in vocabulary here and there. And I see one part of one that I wanted to keep and then another part of a different translation. But, whatever. This is just me complaining. Boo-hoo. I don't know French. It's not your guys' problem. I'm just addressing, that I only know English read translations. And two, Rimbaud is definitely not for everyone. Just like how poetry isn't for everyone, but to an even further extent. As in, this is all dense prose, and if you're rating on a scale of literary ambiguity, I can't say that word, Rimbaud makes you okay with not knowing what the hell the text means, simply by accepting the fact that, perhaps it doesn't mean anything. So often with literary stuff like this, enjoyment can just come out of picking words apart to see what they mean instead of just feeling them. You could do both, of course, but in this case, the interpretations that I took were just largely applied personally, because in a lot of cases, you just can't understand what it means, but by you accepting that perhaps the text means nothing, and by feeling the text, you get something personal out of it, like an interpretation, and then you feel something from it. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is why I see Rimbaud, I can't even speak, is not for everyone. Because there's a lot of feeling in it, and I feel like it's less attached to reality somewhat. I like how poetry is subjective, but you could say that Rimbaud's words aren't concrete enough in real world meaning, but there's a delicacy. It's kind of like a surreal type of word, and I think it's inspired by the surrealist movement or whatever. The best explanation that I could give with my pea-size, I'm not that well-read type of guy, whatever knowledge is, when Picasso, the artist, paints a person, not in a typical way, but in a strange, beautiful way. This is like that if he's describing the world like Picasso, but in words. As in, it's a weird distortion, and it's not typical or orthodox in any way when you look at it or read it and feel it, but it's still an upper level of whoa! And this is my favorite. It's called Dawn, that I read in Illuminations, which is a collection or whatever. I kissed the summer dawn, and from to the palaces nothing stirred. The lakes lay dead, an army of shadows slept on the forest floor. I walked on, wakening the warm, live air, and the stones watched me, and wings rose up without a sound. What happened first was that, in the cool, now shimmering path, a flower told me her name. I laughed at the blonde waterfall whose hair streamed down through the pines. At the silvery summit, I recognized the goddess. Then one by one I lifted her veils, in the path waving my arms, in the flatlands where I told the rooster she was coming. In the great city she ran away among the steeples and the domes, and running like a beggar among the marble piers I gave chase. At a crest in the road, near a grove of laurels, I gathered her up in the net of her own veils, and only then began to know her infinite body, dawn and the child dove to the bottom of the wood. I woke at noon. So to me, this is just like a love poem, but like oh my god, it's just beautiful. Some favorite individual lines here. Some sentences, you just separate them by themselves, so they're amazing. Like if you just like pry one sentence from one of his poems, ignore the rest of the poem, you're like, oh my god. This one's from The Drunken Boat. I'm pretty sure that was like a really famous one. I don't even know if that was in Illuminations. I don't know, but there's this one thing where it says, I have seen enormous swamps ferment, fish traps, where a whole leviathan rots in the rushes. And I don't know, I just like that. It sounds really cool. I don't know, it just tickled my brain. This is all this is. This is just tickling your brain. About Rimbaud himself, he abandoned poetry at 21, and he didn't write any for the remaining years of his life until his death at age 37. And A Season in Hell, which is like the thing that he actually published, which is the second thing that I read, but it was shorter. Like I wouldn't even call it like a book. It was more just like a publication, in terms of length. But that was literally about like his breakup, like his relationship with this guy Verlaine, like his lover, and then he like shot him or something. I don't know. It sounds like a really toxic relationship, but that's what they call it, a season in hell. Only that it probably being said in French, and even the title would probably sound a lot cooler. Rimbaud self-silenced himself, and a poet self-silencing himself in terms of he basically was like, this is like all that I have to say about poetry. That's it. I'm done. And he was only 21. It's sort of this mystical thing that, makes him more cryptic and alluring. People would write like conspiracy theories or I don't know, but they don't know. This is so long ago. This is like 1870s France or whatever. But anyways, after his poetry career, his time as a poet on this earth, he went to Indonesia by enlisting as a soldier and then running off. And he worked as a construction worker in Cyprus and settled in 1880 in Yemen, becoming a merchant in coffee and firearms in Ethiopia. And he was a close friend of Emperor Haile Selassie's father, the governor of Harar, Ethiopia. And this picture of him that I'm going to throw up is pretty tough. I don't know, he just it looks tough. And this is from Wikipedia. He was in fact a pioneer in the business, the first European to oversee the export of the celebrated coffee of Harar from the country where coffee was born. He was only the third European ever to set foot in the city, and the first to do business there in Ethiopia. He's talking about. So that's pretty cool. And I saw this thing saying like, oh, marketing is easy when you've already sold like the most important things ever, which is his literary prowess. And I don't remember where I read that on the internet, or it was probably worded better when I first read it, but like this was like never meant for publication, I don't think. At least the Illuminations thing, it was like drafts, and then it was published at some point when he was, on his travels or whatever, because he was already abandoned all that. So a lot of this stuff, I feel like when a poet is not writing for publication, it almost comes out better, because when something's going for publication, there's all these people and rules that get in the way saying, you can't write like that. But when it's not for publication, it's just like a draft that someone publishes. It's like better because it's in the original. Well, that better if they're good, which in this case they are. So it's like in its original form, Even in spite of that, I still feel like there were curveballs in the writing to be like, for people like me, they're accustomed to reading stuff, looking for meaning, and thinking that something always inherently has meaning. They'll just throw something in there. This is at the end of the poem Childhood. These beautiful descriptions. Let them rent me this whitewashed tomb at last, with cement lines in relief. Far down underground, I lean my elbows on the table. The lamp shines brightly on these newspapers. I am fool enough to read again these stupid books. An enormous distance above my subterranean parlor. Houses take root. Fogs gather. The mud is red or black. Monstrous city. Night without end. And it goes on and on. Very beautiful, beautiful description. And then it ends after 5 huge stanza paragraphs. I am master of silence. Why should the semblance of an opening pale under one corner of the vault? And that's the end of it. That's the end of the poem. And it doesn't make any sense. And I am literally convinced at this specific poem ending that it was written on purpose to not make sense and be nonsensical, so that someone reading it, chasing the idea that the poem means something, is just subverted by being like, oh, crap, I mean, this is just a wall. It's just a wall. It just doesn't mean anything. And I think that's the beauty. He was just a lost guy. I saw some comments, because, I did watch some YouTube videos about this guy. They're like, Gen Z would love this guy. He's so lost. And I think that's what it is, too, because even though he makes it seem like Rimbaud he's very angsty. All this is written when he was like a teenager. Like he was a genius or whatever. But like all this has to come from pain. There's no way that this amount of beauty would not come from pain. And people would say that he's a genius, but I think like all you really feel is a lost in this writing. But like I was gonna say it in a poetic way. It's lost in the way that anyone would be growing up, which is why it's relatable. And it's the writing is ambiguous enough and cryptic enough, but also beautiful and enchanting to the point where you could point at anything and have it mean something to you. So that's why I think it's good. So this is Gen Z reacts to Rimbaud. Overall, I like the book. Took a while to read it. Some poems I liked better than others. It really tickled my brain. But now I know who Rimbaud is, and I'm collecting the guy that's really well read, stamps that I'm getting, in terms of poetry at least. But yeah, this is me. Like